Good evening, everyone, members of the community, my fellow council member, Vice Mayor Rod Sinks, council member Savita Vaidyanathan, and our consultants from Opticos, as well as our economic consultant that have come out this evening and been with us throughout the week. We're at the very end of the first charrette, and it's been a quite extraordinary week. It seems like somewhere midweek we turned a bit of a corner visualizing the possibilities that we could be looking at in the Vallco space. And I just want to reiterate the thank yous. It's been a very educational process, and our goals in this entire time was to make sure that we actually have true community engagement that's substantive, and of course, one of the most fundamental elements of making sure that happens is that we have good educational backgrounds that aren't really coming from a particular perspective. Because, of course, a lot of times when we say, well, let's educate the other person, we're trying to push a particular side. But our consultants, led by Bill Leonards and Dan Perolik, have been very excellent. We specifically found them for the purpose of being able to meld design with community engagement. We have an economic analyst who's engaged us over the week, Ben Sigmund, and now we have a couple of proposals that were ultimately the amalgamation of this process. So thank you for coming out tonight. Without any further delay, I'll give you Bill Leonards.
Okay, we're really excited to be at this point. Mostly we want to get to the designs. We've been talking a lot over the past few months, but what we really like to do is what we call inquiry by design. So what you're going to see tonight is a work in progress. I underline that, a work in progress. These are draft ideas that you're seeing for the first time. And we're going to keep moving with you as these things progress. Some things will get right, some things will get wrong, and that's the way it works. We keep saying, what about this? What about that? What about that? So, okay. Let's remember when we're together to respect each other, to put our glasses on when we can't read. Yes. Let's listen actively and respectfully and balance our speaking times. Avoid dominating the discussion. We have some people with a lot of passions who want to talk a lot and have a lot of ideas, but we want to try and let everyone be involved and critique ideas, not people, and let's stay on the topic. And we'll have a very good meeting. So that's all for me. I want to invite Dan Perolik, head of Opticos Design, up to talk about the work of the week.
Good evening. I do just want to reiterate as I jump into this presentation, what Bill mentioned is that these ideas are definitely a work in progress. We've only been working on this for what, 4 days now. The digital tools of today make things look much more complete and finished than they might be. So there's more feedback loops, and I wanted to show this slide to reinforce the fact that one of the true benefits of this project and the way that the city laid this out is that we have a second design charrette. So this first charrette enabled us to get some ideas out there over the course of this 4.5 days. Then at the end of the May, we're coming back. And we're going to work with you to refine these ideas even further. So I just wanted to keep that in mind as we move through this. And this is the conversation that we've been having over the course of this week, the reality of the situation. I think one of the ways we framed this, the importance of this week early on in the process is that we know a lot of people probably said, well, why continue with this specific plan? Why continue with this process now that the SB 35 submittal's in? And we've actually had some good conversations with you all about the fact that this is you, as the community, this is your opportunity to put a preferred alternative on the table related to the SB 35 program. And so we're really excited to be here working with you and feel like we've made some great progress in working with you this week. And So a brief summary of the week. Can I just get a show of hands of those of you who at some point participated in either one of the presentations or came by the studio? So a good maybe 3/4 of the people. So some of this will be new to you, and we'll make sure I'm gonna give the presentation tonight. We're gonna move the boards down off of the stage so we don't have anybody falling off the stage, and we're gonna stick around and let you ask the team members questions about some of these ideas that are on the boards. And we also want to invite you over to the studio just across the courtyard here, because there's actually a 3D model there that we've actually masked out one of the schemes, and you'll see some photos of it, but it's really great to see it in person. So about 75 people attended the opening presentation. Looks like we're about there tonight. Approximately 150 people walked through the open studio over the course of the week. Felt that we had a pretty decent stream of people through the studio, and then between 25 to 30 people at each of the 3 brown bag lunches on economics, one on transportation and the other on form-based coding. So, right, the participation was pretty good. We're hoping to actually have more people come to the second charrette. So we're gonna do our job to try to get the word out more broadly, and we do encourage you to reach out to your colleagues, friends, neighbors, business affiliates, and please do invite them to come to that second charrette. So Monday night, Monday evening from 6 to 7:30, we started with the kickoff presentation and the breakouts. On Monday and Tuesday, if you dropped by the studio, what you saw is the team started rolling up their sleeves. We started putting the pencil to paper, and we generated dozens of framework alternatives, different types of public spaces, a number of drawings to kind of just get ideas down on paper and to get the team thinking and to have some ideas for you all to react to as you walked through the design studio. And then on Wednesday, at 6 o'clock on Wednesday, the team had whittled down those dozens of concepts down to 3 different alternatives. And for those of you who attended on that Wednesday sort of pinup session in the studio, we actually walked the audience through those 3 different alternatives and the different elements of those alternatives. I thought I'll say the studio was a little bit tight. The model takes up a good chunk of the studio, but I thought it was a really good dialogue that we had on Wednesday and got, once again, some really good feedback. Mentioned the topic-specific deep dives or the brown bag lunches. Ben Sigmund did the Tuesday brown bag on economics, and Steve Lawton was there to talk a little bit more about retail. Hugh Locke from Alta Planning was there to do the transportation brown bag on Wednesday, and Tony Perez from Opticos did the form-based code presentation on Thursday. And I do believe all of those have been uploaded onto the city's website, or sorry, the project website. I've actually seen them playing in the vestibule on the TV over the course of the last several days. So I do encourage you to take a look at those if you haven't already. Then the open studio conversations, and I think this is one of the real benefits of the charrette process, is we bring our team here, we set up our design studio, we bring our computers, we bring our drawing utensils, and it's a really active, vibrant, energetic environment, and it enables us to make some really good progress over the course of a few days and interact with you and get more feedback loops from you, and interact with our multidisciplinary team and get some feedback loops completed with them as well over the course of the week. We did, every day we actually downloaded quite a bit of content onto the project website. If you're signed up for the email every morning, I noticed I was getting that email, looking through that list of stuff. I think that was great to see. I know there were some comments early on in the process that the website was a little bit stale in terms of content. So I would say there's probably plenty of content on there to keep you busy for a few weeks anyway, until we get to that next charrette, or at least start thinking more specifically about that. To start off, before I dive into so tonight we've focused down the 3 large alternatives into two primary alternatives that each have two different sub-options under them. So it's 4 total options, but 2 primary themes that they fit underneath. But before I jump into those, I think it's really important to mention that there's a lot of shared elements and a lot of shared themes between the 2 schemes. So I just wanted to go over those as a starting point. Sorry, I do want to mention, behind me to your left this is somewhat of a chronological sort of process that happened in the studio with the rougher sort of plan drawings on trace paper, where you might see several layers taped on one another that we integrated over the course of the week. And then these boards here with the brightly colored drawings are the ones that we've generated in the last day and a half to clearly represent the 2 different alternatives that I'll talk with you about tonight. So the first one is a pretty basic one. It's making the streets more pedestrian and bicycle friendly. And that's a concept that's shared across the 2 schemes. I think it's a pretty basic concept, but I just wanted to continue to reinforce it. We heard a lot about importance of connectivity, walkability, bikeability. So that is a theme that's shared across the different schemes. Just as one example, we are looking at Wolf Road and thinking about how can you make even Wolf Road a much more inviting a street to walk along? How do you make it the type of street that a business would actually want to front onto as opposed to back onto? If you've ever been to like Santana Row, for example, everything's really internalized, and they gave up on the outside streets and turned their backs to those outside streets. So we're thinking much better idea to create a gateway and sort of an identity to the project that orients onto those external streets as well. So one of the ideas here is that we can introduce a local travel lane on the western side so that if you've ever been to Paris or Barcelona, any of the cities that have these multi-way boulevards, or the Octavia Boulevard in San Francisco where they tore down the freeway, it has that local travel lane and it still has through traffic going in the middle. So it's a great way to create a beautiful street that people will walk along, business want to orient on without impacting the flow of traffic through the area. The second key concept is very thoughtful transitions into the neighborhoods. Right, this is something that we've heard over the course of this project, and it's an important aspect for the neighborhoods in particular. I just want to say that there's absolutely no intent in this process to take the wall down unless that's something that the community really supports and pushes for. And we're also protecting those rows of trees along that edge. So, I'm hoping that if that's not done initially, that such a great place is developed here that you all think twice about wanting that punched opening through there to enable you to walk to the really great amenities that are in this project area. But I think for now, we've actually heard varying viewpoints, but right now we're just saying, okay, well, let's let the community decide what they want to do with that. This is just a view, and you'll see this when you go take a look at the model in the studio. The idea is that there's a very careful and thoughtful transition from the biggest buildings that are mostly happening at the northeast corner and scaling down as you move across the site to basically the west and the southwest, basically. So this is actually a view. The majority of our schemes, if not, I think all of the schemes actually have 3 to 4 stories at that immediate western edge, and we can still achieve the program by scaling up the buildings as you progress away from that neighborhood. So this is just a view of that scale of the development, the residential, the new housing that's closest to that the Blaney neighborhood. And that's a view with that housing fronting onto the perimeter road. So there's some alternatives here that the houses sort of bump right up to where the current perimeter road goes. And then there's another set of alternatives where the housing actually orients onto a larger green open space. And what I'd say about that, and this is a conversation that we need to continue to have, is the trade-off, one of the trade-offs for thinking about the desire for more at-grade open space is that we are likely going to need to bump up the buildings at some other part of the project in exchange for that area becoming open space. So that's a good dialogue for us to have as we work our way through this process. Right, there's a series of programmatic elements. I mean, I don't want to sound like a broken record here, but I just want to reinforce that, right, there's things that the community said we absolutely want that are existing, that even the SB 35 proposal, oh, just wait, I'm not even sure of that, but right, they've been a constant theme here, that the skating rink, the bowling alleys, and you want a movie theater. So we're integrating those uses. Now, what I'll say is, right, a lot of this, there's going to be a lot of back and forth between now and the second charrette, at the second charrette, and after the second charrette, and our team working with the Sand Hill team to like figure out viability and community's desires, and sort of you all prioritizing which of the benefits you'd like to sort of exchange for elements within the plan. So we, rightfully so, we didn't talk enough about housing in the kickoff presentation. So I wanted to make sure, obviously, housing is a major component of this, these alternatives. And so we definitely not ignoring it. Some creative thoughts that have come up over the course of the week is several people brought up the idea of, well, how does co-housing integrate into the project area? What that is it's you might have a shared courtyard where you get a group of your friends together and you purchase a series of housing units with a shared space, maybe a shared kitchen, maybe ultimately with shared medical care. So, you know, those are the sorts of things we're not thinking that carefully about program right now, but those are ideas that we'd like to sort of continue to move forward with. Right, this percentage of affordable. 50% of the housing in the SB 35 scheme would be affordable at different levels. That's actually a pretty neat thing to have 50% of housing affordable. Where will the affordability sort of dial land as there's a back and forth and thinking about overall program, public amenities? And so that's going to be something that's going to be talked about very closely and carefully and quite often over the course of the remainder of this process. Right, this came up several people, like, what about affordability for groups that have not been discussed to date? And I just think it's really affordability in a broad spectrum, sort of from the upper level to the most lower levels. And so we'll continue to be talking about that. Right, the high-rise housing. Right, I think it sort of makes people a little bit anxious. It's something new for your community. If the SB 35 proposal is showing multiple high-rise residential towers, I think the ultimate question is going to be, well, it's if they're happening, but probably more so where they're happening, and sort of a sort of back and forth of public amenity versus size versus location versus the number of them. So I want to put that on the table. There's no decisions being made. I want to just be really open and transparent that the high-rise residential towers are on the table. They're being discussed and they're likely part of that program. So there's other things, right? I'm sure we've missed some, but we're going to keep thinking about this. We want to keep you giving us thoughts about this. Other ideas we'll continue to be thinking about, right? There's multiple entities, multiple community members, multiple organizations have brought up this idea of an innovation center or an innovation hub. Everything from elementary schools, middle schools, high schools, colleges, universities, and businesses in the city, right, could play a very active role in thinking about how do we take advantage of the really smart kids that you have here, the great school programs you have here that are also already focusing on these innovation ideas, and then maybe ideally, obviously, pull in the local businesses that can support that and actually play a really important part of that. So, and it's everything providing maker space, shared space, independent space, maybe even on-site housing for maybe you have fellows that come in and participate in those programs. So I think it's a really interesting idea, and I think it's something that we just will continue to explore and understand the viability of as we move forward. Other thoughts, senior ecosystem, right? I thought that was a pretty interesting concept. It could be senior co-housing, it could be medical services, it could be any sort of support networks. Or, right, I think we were talking with the school districts, and they're thinking about opening more preschools. So why not have the seniors that live in the area actually be a support system, maybe even a volunteer system for those preschools to have that social interaction. Thinking creatively about a broader range of office uses. I'll say that this is a community, and rightfully so, is the second we say office, you know who everybody thinks about, right? There's one user that everybody thinks about. And we're not at a tenanting point right now, but there's been a lot of creative ideas that have come up from you all about different ways to define and think about office. Is it medical offices? Is it, I mean, just it's more of what Steve Lawton said, it's the outward facing office type. It's not the internal facing. So it's types of uses that might even be on the ground floor, but they're interacting with the people the pedestrians in the environment. So we're gonna think creatively about what could some of those uses be. Adult education, right, that keeps coming up. The school district brought it up. It's been part of the conversation. We just wanna keep it through. You know, we wanted to throw out the idea of a potential eco district. You know, could you achieve some of the goals of the community in terms of sustainability by thinking about this area as an eco district? We're not gonna push it and prioritize it if it's not a priority for the community, but we think it's actually a really interesting idea to consider. And then you'll see on some of the photo boards a couple of different community members, and what I thought was really interesting is 2 community members with disparate viewpoints on of this project actually said, have you seen that vertical forest building that was built in Milan? It's about a 15-story residential building that has these really beautiful deep terraces that have gardens and trees planted on them. So it's providing access to nature for the residents that live in those spaces. So we said, well, let's put it up on our ideas board and think about that. If we're talking about sort of taller residential buildings, let's think about some of these innovative ideas in that front as well. So now I'm going to jump into the summary of the different alternatives, the 2 alternatives. And as a starting point, the 2 primary alternatives are both about creating a vibrant, identity-generating place, achieving that town center that you all defined as a goal in your general plan, and doing it in different ways. Once again, they're a work in progress. These are, you know, we're actually pretty excited at the progress we've made, but there's more feedback loops to happen. So the first of the alternatives is what we're just calling internal square. And we just kept the names really basic. We just want to they are what they are. So if you were into Studio, this is an early concept drawing that has like 3 different layers of trace paper, but it's where the activity for your new town center is focused on an internal square in a more of a traditional urban pattern. So you can imagine a Sonoma Square, a Napa Square, that sort of just a really more of a traditional form. But we wanted to also think about within that framework, there's a ton of opportunities, whether it be in the architecture of the buildings, the architectural elements that happen in the square, that could help make that framework and that concept sort of move forward to a more innovative differentiator. Because if you remember what Steve Lawton said at the retail brown bag is one of the most important aspects of retail is differentiating yourself from the competition. So that's an important part. So I know it's going to be a little bit hard for you to see these, but on the left-hand slide, the street that goes vertical there is Wolf Road, and it's Vallco Parkway splitting sort of that halfway there. And so there's a public square at a diagonal. The building on your upper right, that's at that diagonal, you know, we've heard a lot about, is there an opportunity to integrate a new city hall? Is there an opportunity to integrate a new performing arts theater? So we took that program and said, hey, this is one way and one great opportunity to define that upper edge of this new public square, and the other edges would be defined by that ground floor retail that would activate the space. And this is just a quick aerial view. It's actually a pretty substantial space. So it could be programmed in many different ways based on what the community wants. On your right-hand side, there's just a representation of a band shell, and there could be a large outdoor amphitheater that could be programmed, you know, as often as possible to activate that new space. On your left-hand side is just a simple, you know, representation of a really well-designed, cutting-edge landscape pavilion. There could be space in there that hosts the Innovation Center. There could be gallery space. There could be the council chambers could actually be in there as like an object. Sorry, on the right-hand side. Sorry, I apologize. I'm flipped around here. So that circle, the big circle, and there's a little rectangle in it. And so, what you'll see on the lower portion of this are just the placeholders for that potential city hall and that potential performing arts center. And we've looked at several performing arts centers. There's a great one in Mountain View. There's a great one in Livermore. You know, this, we don't know how big. The Livermore one's about 500 people. I think the Mountain View one holds about 600, if I'm correct. But, you know, it could be a little bit bigger as this progresses. Not sure yet. We need to think about that. We studied these spaces and their sizes and the quality. Okay, so this is a view looking down Vallco Parkway. So currently, we didn't put the before in here, but if in the current scheme here, you'd be standing on the side of the street that has the parking garage on your right-hand side, and the AMC Theater building would be terminating this view. So the idea here is that we're creating a really strong connection by activating this corner of Vallco Parkway with ground floor retail. And if you cross that street, if you keep going straight across Wolf Road, there's some sort of signature architectural element that draws you off of Wolf Road into the new town square, or that public square space. So this is just giving you a sense of scale, character, right? Just to give you a sense of what that could potentially look and feel like. Then there's a subset within this scheme which simply says on the right, sort of the western edge of this project, we're introducing a large linear green space. And this is what I mentioned earlier. This is just saying what if, because we wanted to study that scenario. And the rest of the scheme stays exactly the same. There's just a different interface with that introduction of that open space on the western edge. Okay. So here's a slightly different variation of that image looking down Vallco Parkway with a, 10, 15, whatever story high-rise residential building. And so we wanted to introduce this in saying that might be one of the trade-offs, right? If you want that large open space along the western edge, are you okay with the trade-off of getting taller buildings in certain locations? So that's a conversation we're going to have. We need to have, okay? So, so we've had questions about program, right? And so we have been hastily, over the course of the last day and a half, sort of putting building footprints into those frameworks, the street and block frameworks, and have generated several program alternatives within those frameworks. Now, once again, this is a work in progress. We're going to study many more of these. But this was our first pass at sort of getting some numbers out there and showing that we could actually, as a starting point, accommodate a program that is equivalent to the SB 35 program within this network, this street and block network that we're proposing in these two schemes. So that was the starting point. So you can see here, we're at approximately 415,000 square feet of retail and entertainment. We're at about 1.8 million of office in this scheme, 2,400 housing units, about 65,000 square foot of the civic space for that city hall, maybe supporting education uses. And we're at about 5 acres. This is the scheme without the western green, about 5 acres of open space. And so what I'll say is that according to the current city requirements, the project would actually be required to provide about 13 acres of open space. So the trade-off would be, the one option is for the project to actually pay an in lieu fee. The other option would be to go to that bigger Western Green scheme and shift programs somewhere else on the site. And I think what's important about this is thinking about not just a number in terms of the open space, but the quality and character of the types of open spaces that are being provided. But definitely sort of ask our team members questions about this and look carefully at the plans and the types of spaces that are being provided. Okay, then we... that does not include 50%. What I would say is that percentage, right now the city cannot require more than 15% affordable. So that's a great question. I don't remember. So we'll answer that. What I'll say is let's grab the answer. That's a great question. I have to admit I'm a little bit tired, and we will definitely be talking. That's an important part, and I should remember that, but I have forgotten. And so the second alternative that we did for each of these different frameworks was lowering the office space in the project. And basically, so the retail program stayed the same. The office program came down to about 1.3 million square foot of office. And so this one, so actually, this is, the residential is actually staying the same, but the affordability requirement is coming down in terms of the percentage is coming down. And so those are the sorts of numbers we're going to have to work with EPS and work with Sand Hill over the course of this project and understand sort of where those are going to land in terms of percentages and even the breakdown of that affordable housing as well. Civic stayed the same. And once again, I just mentioned that this is about 5 acres of provided open space, so there'd have to be a payment of in lieu fee to mitigate, to sort of fill the gap between the required open space and the provided open space. So in the scheme, which we're calling the 1B scheme here, which introduces that Western Green, once again, it's at the SB 35 program. And we're just showing this because the program stays the same, but when you get a chance to look more carefully at the massing, there's more height on a series of the buildings because we took it off of the green. So I'm just going to encourage you to take a close look at these and talk to us and ask us questions about it. So the second alternative that we moved forward, we're calling this the Edge Plaza. And in this scheme, so this was an early sketch of this, it's thinking about right along Wolf Road where Vallco Parkway meets it, let's think about some large, we're calling it a retail pavilion, but it's some signature entertainment retail building that's solely retail and entertainment that's very iconic, that becomes the core component of the retail entertainment part of the project. So this was just an early sketch of that. And so you see here the irregular building, this is Wolf Road going north-south, that irregular block in the middle just above the square is that retail entertainment block. And you would have ground floor retail surrounding that with either office or residential above. Right now we're thinking of it, our first pass was residential above, but there could be a mix of both office and residential. This sort of signature retail pavilion could be achieved. That we're not, I guess I want to be clear that we're not designing that. This is just, we're defining a program, we're defining a direction, then ultimately the property owner would work with their architect to do the actual development plan and design that building, but we're defining the parameters for that concept. And so we looked at the spaces, and so this is that same view looking down Vallco Parkway, so at currently where the AMC Theater is, and on your left-hand side there you can see just this, it's a very contemporary signature retail entertainment food destination. So that's the driving force behind this concept. Once again, we have the alternative with the western green on this scheme as well. And I just want to mention, so what we did here is, if you look straight down this sidewalk, we've introduced a taller building there. So that's a pretty logical location for a taller residential building in the scheme where you have that large western green. So we just wanted to introduce that and have a conversation about it. Sorry, that's looking west. We're on Vallco Parkway. See the existing building on your right with Stein's restaurant? Sorry, left. And then on your right-hand side is where the parking structure is. And then you would basically be seeing the AMC sign right in front of you in the current condition. So we can sort of orient you when you come up to the boards. We can give you a little bit better orientation to that as we go through this. So once again, we took those schemes. We took a first quick pass at integrating that program into them. Once again, we started with that SP35 number as a starting point. A little under 500,000 square foot of entertainment and retail. About 1.82 million of office. That would, I think we'd come down on that a little bit. 2,400 housing units, the little under 50,000 of civic space, and then this one has about 8.6 acres of public space, so it's a little bit short of the 13 required. So once again, would need sort of to figure out a way to make that up. And then lowering the office to just a little under 1.3. Retail stays about the same at about 436,000, 2,400 units, and 45 of civic space, and the 8.6 acres of open space. So I'm just going to sort of we can talk about these numbers. It's just it gets a little bit repetitive with the two because we followed a similar approach for each of the different schemes, but we're happy to talk about these in detail at the boards. So, in terms of next steps, we know that these alternatives need to be very carefully assessed. And that's really the primary reason we sort of move forward with a two-stage charrette process, because we got to a milestone. We kind of take these back and have Ben and Hugh sort of take those back to their studios and assess them for transportation impacts. How do we start thinking about transportation demand management strategies? And Ben starts sharpening the pencils with his Excel spreadsheet and thinks about sort of the program mix, viability. We have conversations with the property owners, with the city, and sort of bring that information back to you all so we can do this in another round. I would like to let Hugh come up, and he wanted to just say a few things about, he doesn't have any slides, but he just wanted to say a few things about sort of next steps in terms of transportation and transportation demand management strategy.
Sure. Thanks. You're welcome. I'll just say a couple words, and we'll be here after. Happy to chat with folks more. Good to see many of you again here. I think as we look at this, one of the great things coming out of this for us, thinking about the transportation question, is now we start to have a little bit of a handle on what that program looks like, and we can start to answer the question, what type of different strategies can use to manage the trips that will be generated by this. And we'll also have a better understanding of how many trips will be generated by this as you start to lock in a kind of specific number for office and for housing. And there are different strategies, and I think when I talked to folks on Tuesday, there are different strategies that you can use and approaches, and those strategies include a mix of, obviously land use strategies, providing the kind of mixed use approach that's being used here does have sort of some benefits in and of itself to get people reducing certain kinds of trips, but then other things like parking, we talked a lot about, and the relationship between parking cost and supply, and how much people travel by single occupant vehicle, and then other strategies that are more kind of the incentives, so providing support for transit or biking and walking and other things like that. And as we look at those, there's a pretty wide range of what's possible, but now we get to start to kind of narrow narrow in on what that means. If we're talking about just the most basic strategies for a program like this, we're probably in a very small percentage reduction, maybe in the 5 to 10% range. As we start to build in kind of parking strategies, you get to a more substantial potential reduction, where we can get into 25 or 30% reduction in trips. And so, we'll want to kind of take all that work, assemble what we think the best kind of package of investments that sort of matches each one of these, and that'll be great to share with you, I think, when we get into the second charrette. So other than that, I think that's all I wanted to say. And, yeah.
And then Ben will be working with his team at EPS, Ben Sigmund, to vet that economic viability, studying the transportation impacts. Basically, the idea here is, right, we've got a couple of feedback loops from you before the charrette. We've done several feedback loops at this charrette, and the idea is, right, we're still digesting. We had hundreds of Post-it notes on the photo boards, a lot of blue dots of photos that people liked, images people liked. So Aaron and Bill did a great job of starting to digest that information. Actually, it was a lot, and we'll continue to digest that and let that inform us as we come into the second charrette. But May 21st through 25th is the date of that second charrette. So it's 5 weeks from now. So it's going to come upon us pretty quickly. But I appreciate you coming tonight. We're going to shift our, oh, yes.
Sorry, I need to tell one word.
Okay.
Website.
Oh, yes.
Okay. Okay, two things. One is the dates are wrong.
Oh.
Because it's before Memorial Day. And so we're shifting the 25th is a Friday before Memorial Day. We don't think that's a good idea.
Okay.
So it's going to be the 20th through the 24th. That'll be correct on the website. Within the next week, the website will have a new component called Civic Comment. We're going to take these concepts that you've seen and put them up for a different type of interaction than you've had before. You'll be able to look at each drawing, put a note on it, and that note will be linked to comments, and it'll be a kind of a more, almost like a sticky note type of interaction that will start to occur within the week. It takes us a long time to, first we have to sleep, and then it takes us a long time to get this processed. So, in the charrette way, what we're going to do is keep doing what we did last Wednesday. We're going to invite you up to get up close to these things. We're going to be here talking to you as long as you want to talk. So the team, I want them to come up. We're going to post them. So give us a sec. We're going to move these off the stage, right? And we're going to join you at the drawings. All right, thank you.